Hello and welcome. This is yet another episode of the Sagas of the Scraps. I'm using up the pink and green ones this episode.
It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket.
Before we get into this gorgeous dress with the massive skirt, let's take a look back at the patchworks and the scraps I've used up so far. So I got my scraps out to make the reversible jacket because of the Sew Reversible Sewing Challenge. And that was awesome. I really loved making that jacket. So then I used my red scraps, red and some of the pink scraps, to make the vintage dress with the gored skirt. So sort of panels in that skirt and all one layer. And I absolutely love that one too, especially the little strawberries in there. So then I decided to cut up all my scraps into usable sort of strips that I could then sew together. And I was just stuck on a lot of conference calls. So that was what I considered a constructive use of my time. And so then I decided that the pink ones and the green ones would make an absolutely adorable dress. So I sort of stitched them up. At first I put them into, I was going to mix them completely. And I just did a couple of strips like that. And then I was like, no. And I ended up unpicking them and I was like, green, pink, green, pink. And then I was going to pleat down the pinks. So you could see, at the bottom of each tier, you'd see the pink, but at the top you just see mostly green. And then I started to run out of pinks, so I went through all my scraps again to find more pinks, which I did. And then I had to do more strips, sew them all together. So first I sewed them together and then I top stitched over them because I just hand wash my dresses. So this is adequate sewing down of the raw edges, raw seams for me. So now I've got yards and yards of these made up patches. And then I set that aside actually in the right hand corner there you can see that I cut this green and white patchwork into strips, sewed it together and made it into a skirt that is going to become a vintage dress. But before, and then I set that aside and I finished this gorgeous jacket. It's made out of Chanel tweed and it's got bugle beads beaded all over it. And yeah, I'm really happy with the way that one turned out. But anyway, let's talk about this again and I'll show you the skirt. And yeah, I still haven't decided what I'm going to do about the bodice. So yes, but the skirt is finally done. Here she is, hiding in the corner there. It looks like a multicolored cape or something, doesn't it? Or a coat. I kind of want a coat that looks like this, but also not. But I kind of do. Anyway, it's the skirt, but because of the way it's stitched together, I don't want to pull it down over the shoulders and pin it to the waist. It's the way that the shoulders hold the weight of it is actually better for that top bit. So it's pink, red, pink, red, pink, red, and I've pleated under the pinks. So yeah, you can see them at the bottom of the tier, but at the top of the tier it's mainly just green. I love it so much. It's gorgeous. It's such a twirlable skirt. And they're slightly shorter than my usual, like in the pink and red one here. Each tier is 30 centimetres or 1 foot. And in the one that I've just finished, these tiers are 20, I think they're 25 centimetres. But then, of course, there's seam allowance, so they're a little bit shorter. So they're about 2/3 the length of these ones. That's why this one has 3 tiers and the one I just finished has 4 tiers. So this one is 3 tiers, 2, 4, 8, and the pink and green one is 4 tiers of 1.5, 3, 6, 12. So I have used up so much fabric in this. Here it is. I've taken it down off the workbench and put it in front of the side table. And yeah, you can really see how full this skirt is. I did try to put it over my vintage petticoat to make it look a bit more vintage, but this skirt is so heavy. The petticoat really didn't make any difference, so I took it out and I just sort of pinned it up to a mannequin. It's so pretty. There are some sections, like some of the scraps, that pale pink one is broderie anglaise, so it's a really thin, fine cotton with machine eyelet embroidery on it. So I might have to go back. I'll wear it a few times before I decide, but I might have to go back in and just put some plain fabric behind it, just if I feel like it's too see-through. I don't think it is, especially since, I mean, the only time you really sort of open out the skirt is if you're twirling around, so just normally I think it's fine. Anyway, it is time to work on the bodice now. And I have this scrap of fabric. It is half a yard of fabric, full width. It's quilting cotton, so it's only 45 inches across, which is 115 centimeters. So I could have done the front and back using the lotus or the water lily, but I decided to make two bodices because I wasn't really sure. One's normal length and the other one is cropped. The cropped one just looks more vintage because you have to tie the sash. The waistline of the dress is at your natural waist, which is much higher, whereas the newer way of making dresses is to have it closer to your hips. So I just decided to make up both, and then I've got plenty of other pink fabric and green fabric, so I'll make a second dress because I really love this fabric, and I was like, yeah, I'll just make two. So then I used the burrito method to do the bodice because it's sleeveless. So first of all, you sew the shoulders together on the outer bodice and the lining bodice. Then you pin and sew the neckline. Then you clip the curves. Then you turn it out. And normally I do the understitching around the neckline by hand. But if you do it by machine, this is the point at which you should do it by machine. I don't like doing my understitching by machine because machine sewing gives you a hard line and you can also see it. So every time you look in your closet, you see these machine sewn lines. I do not like it. But this is a dress with a massive patchwork skirt, so there's loads of top stitching visible already, so I decided to go for it. So now I'm doing the armhole. You splay open the lining and the outer bodice, the arm on the right side. Then you roll up the left side and keep rolling until you can easily put the right side lining right over the top so that it goes and meets the right side outer bodice, and then you pin those two together. So here we go. So you pin them at the center first and you make sure that center seam, the shoulder seam, is lining up absolutely, because it would be so annoying if that was off. And then you do the other pins on, down the front and down the back, and then you machine sew. And once you've machine sewn that, you cut down the seam allowance and you clip the curve right the way around so that it will sit properly and it won't pull when you turn it out. And then to turn it out, you sort of lift it up, and you see there, it's that roll of the whole of the left side. You just slowly pull that through the shoulder strap, and all of it comes through eventually. Just do it really, really gently so that you don't wreck anything. And then once that's done, it is time to do the left side, which is just the same process over again. And once you've done that, then there's just the sides to do. So you pin your sides together, like turn the whole thing inside out, pin the sides together, machine sew them. Then you have to press the seam allowance open so that they sit flat under your arm. And then you can finally turn the bodice out and it's all done. At the bottom of the lining, I also machine sew a sew line, so that when you, once you finally attach the skirt, this is me showing you my understitching. Yeah, I really don't like doing machines understitching. It's so visible, but you know, it is quicker. So here we have the two bodices. The one on the right is the longer one, so that's the modern day one, and the one on the left is the cropped one, which is the vintage one. And yeah, I like them both. I really like the way the flowers are sitting on the longer one, but this shorter one, yeah, I mean, the flowers are really beautiful on that one, but I just think this shorter one, okay, let's move over to the shorter one. I just think the shorter one is so much more vintage, and I think it would suit this skirt better because it's kind of, this skirt has a sort of fun vintage vibe to it, in my opinion. I mean, it's too heavy to actually put my 1950s net petticoat under. I mean, you can, it just, you really can't tell that it's there. So yeah, I think we'll go with the shorter bodice. So what you do is you divide it into 4. So I've got a pin in the center front, one in the center back, and I've got a pin on each side as well. So now that that's done, I'll get the skirt off the mannequin very, very carefully, and I'll put 4 pins in that as well. So you got 3 normal pins and one that's different. The one that's different is the center front, and then I've also got one in the center back, left side and right side. So now I'm just going to match up the pins on the bodice to the pins on the skirt, and it's pretty straightforward. And once that's done, because I've already pleated down this skirt, I can't show you how to pleat, but yeah, I mean, there's loads of videos on YouTube already about how to pleat, but basically I feel like you can see, because I've done every second one, is yeah, then you machine sew it, obviously, and you also reinforce it, so you machine sew it a second time. And this is what I mean about the sewing line on the lining of the bodice. See, you sort of, this is the whole dress inside out. And so the skirt is machine sewn to the outer bodice, and now with the lining bodice, you just turn up the raw edge and you hand stitch this down. And because this, well, all skirts are actually quite heavy, having a lining helps carry the weight. When you make a bodice the fast fashion way and you don't have a lining, it's all the weight of the skirt is carried just by your outer bodice. So after a bit of time, it sort of buckles and it sort of wrecks your dress. Whereas if you make a lining, you've got twice as much bodice to carry the whole weight of the skirt. So it ages much better. So anyway, here we go. This is what the dress looks like, just like without any sash or anything like that. And I think it is darling. It is so, so cute. It's really flattering from the side. Normally these sorts of dresses from the side or from the front, they can look a little frumpy. I'm glad I used the plain green on the back. It's because it's such a busy skirt. I was a little bit worried about using this fabric for the bodice because it's so busy, but it's actually busy in a different way to the skirt. So it sort of gives focus in a weird way. So it's actually a really good type of fabric to use. It's a really good print to use with this sort of skirt. And here it is with the sash. It looks so vintage from the side. I think this is my favorite dress from the side, like the silhouette. It's so flattering and just looks so immediately, adding a sash just immediately makes it look more vintage because the waistline is at that sort of cropped vintage height. And here it is. Of course, I had to pin up the skirt so you can see it to full effect. And you can sort of see the few sections that I've used the embroidery on glaze, the scraps. I think if I did it again, I would just make sure that the those eyelet embroidery ones are in the bottom tier. So yeah, there's a few in the second tier, which would be like thigh high. So yeah, I might sort of just put a couple of stitches in so that the greens never really fully open up on those ones. I don't think it matters, but I'll wear it a few times and see. But yeah, there we go. I have used up so many scraps. I'm so proud of myself. I had like a box and a half because I've just been collecting them for over a year now. And it's just feeling really bad. I was like, am I just collecting them and never going to use them and eventually just going to throw them out, or am I actually going to use them? So this month I've made such a concerted effort to use up my scraps and get the others into shape, into size, so that I can actually use them. I'm really, really happy with myself, because sometimes you do stuff and you're like, oh, are you really going to follow through with that? But yeah, and it was dragging on, and I'd only made a couple of patchwork dresses, and I'd sort of ignored them apart from that. But this month I've really worked hard at using up my scraps, so gold star. And I love this dress. I mean, the checker bits, the seersucker green and white fabric, I feel like that catches the eye a little bit too much. If I had my time again, I probably would take those two out. And there's a couple of the lighter green ones that are a bit too light. And as I said, the eyelet, I'd probably just put them in the bottom tier. But I was sort of making the fabric not knowing how much fabric I would get out of this. I did not imagine I would get 4 tiers out of this. I thought maybe 2, maybe 3 if I'm pushing it. But yeah, I've actually got some leftover green and even a little bit of leftover pink. So yeah, I'm pulling them apart and I'll separate them into green pile and pink pile again, and I'll use them in different projects. But I still think I used up an amazing amount of scraps in this dress, and it looks adorable. When you look at it, you're not like, oh, she's just forcing herself to use up scraps. I mean, you could kind of see that. But I don't know, I just think it's a delightful dress. Oh, and I started to say before about the pleats, because I've alternated between pink, green, pink, green, pink, green, I feel like it's really easy to see how the knife pleats were done with this particular dress, more so than any other dress. So yeah, maybe pause it and you'll see. If you just get a bit of paper and draw some lines on it and fold them so every second bit is covered by the next bit next to it, that's how you do knife pleats. And then once you figured out knife pleats, box pleats are basically a more complicated version of knife pleats. So yeah, just press pause and then sort of get out a bit of paper and go, oh, okay, yep, that's how you do it. And yeah, once you do it, you're just like, how did I not know how to do this? So yeah, it's initially a little bit of a mind bend, but once you've got the muscle memory of it, then it's absolutely, you do it second nature. I will show pleating in one of my next videos, probably next month now, because the next video is the green tweed jacket. There's so much work in this dress. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I did quite a bit of work off camera because at some points I was just shouting at the fabric. Well, not shouting, but I was very grumpy with it because it's so much work. But now that it's done, it's awesome. I love it. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've been inspired to rummage through your offcuts and your scraps and finally get them out and make them into something. It takes forever. Warning, it takes forever, but it's so completely worth it. This dress brings me so much joy. But yeah, you might want to have a whole season of a network TV show or an audiobook to listen to because it does take a long time. Actually, I quite like working in silence for some of it, but yeah, when I was doing the machine part, I was kind of like to drown out that with something else. So yeah, it's done. And oh, this bodice is so cute with it. I'm really happy with it because it was sort of like, will it work or will it, because the skirt is busy in one way and the bodice is quite attention seeking in another way. But I don't know, I think they sort of cancel each other out and you just sort of, it's a harmonious hum of a dress rather than look at me, which is, yeah, I never want it to be too glaring or too obvious, whatever I'm wearing. But yeah, I really like this. Really, really like it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Go out there, grab your scraps, make something fabulous. Happy sewing. Okay, maybe it is the tiniest bit over the top, but I've been working on it for what it feels like forever, so I've kind of, desensitized to its spectacularness.